This video touches on the topic of suicide. You might be coming to this video as a researcher or suicidologist who engages in this subject matter in your work, as a survivor of suicide or suicide loss who has been personally impacted by this subject, or as a policymaker looking to translate research into policy. However you're showing up today, the topic of suicide can evoke a deep pain and emotion. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a few grounding reminders, borrowed from Dr. Jeffrey Anslus. You may want to consider checking in with yourself to decide how and when to best watch this video. Maybe you want to watch it with other people. Maybe you want to watch it in the morning and not late at night. We invite you to bring a good heart, a good mind, and a lot of compassion for all as you watch, including yourself. Feel free to take a moment now to pause, reconnect with yourself, and reflect on how you plan on engaging with the content today. There are resources available to you should you want to talk to someone. Depending on where you are in the world, those resources may look different. In the description of this video, we've provided some places to start, with options to get help for yourself and help with supporting someone else.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our Methods Core seminar to walk through our Method Core processes and procedures. I'm Molly Adrian. I'm the Methods Core director, and I'm here with Lucas.
Hey everybody, I'm Lucas, Human-Centered Design Research Scientist at SCRC, and supporting Methods Core.
Awesome. Okay. There we go. Lucas, I'll hand it off to you to get us started.
Yeah, I'm going to start us with a land acknowledgement. So we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, on land that touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Duwamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Learning about the history of this land and recognizing the ongoing impacts of colonialism is part of our responsibility as residents and neighbors. If you haven't yet already, we encourage you to learn more about the land on which you live and work by going to this link here. It's a really wonderful map that helps you understand some of the ancestral stewards of the land, as well as treaties that may be relevant. So I just want to take a moment and join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, past, present, and future. And I'll pass it back to Molly to go into our learning objectives.
Okay, thanks, Lucas. All right, so we hope today, after this short seminar, you are able to describe how data from your project will contribute to the SCRC Methods Core specific aims, locate your project status along the SCRC Project Journey, and identify the required and optional supports and tools offered by the Methods Core. So the center goal is to support the suicide care pathway in outpatient medical settings for adolescents and young adults aged 13 to 30 years old. And the Methods course specifically provides the design expertise and the technical infrastructure to answer two key center questions. So the first is, how can we develop and adapt evidence-based practices for suicide prevention and make them usable, acceptable, and powerful enough to be adopted and implemented at scale? And number two, can we increase the therapeutic alliance and self-efficacy of adolescents and young adult patients, their providers, and their family members to improve the willingness to engage with each other and thus improve suicide outcomes? So we have outlined the suicide care pathway in outpatient medical settings as depicted here. And you can see this goes along a continuum of risk identification, assessment, shared decision-making, short-term risk management, treatment, long-term surveillance, and follow-up. And then we have our implementation mechanisms of acceptability and usability, our therapeutic mechanisms of treatment alliance and self-efficacy. And we hope that if we target these two mechanisms, that these interventions will have reach scalability and improve the lives of others. So you'll see this suicide care pathway and much of our documentation, as we think it illustrates the heart of the center and our guiding framework. So to answer the questions of interest, we have adopted frameworks from human-centered design and the multi-phase optimization strategy to co-design and optimize outpatient suicide care strategies for adolescents and young adults. So the multi-phase optimization strategy MOST is an engineering-inspired framework for developing behavioral interventions that strategically balances intervention effectiveness with affordability, scalability, and efficiency. Our MOST expert, Kelly Rullison, has developed an asynchronous orientation for MOST, and so you can certainly refer to that if you would like a refresher on the MOST framework. But in the briefest of brief summaries, it has 3 phases. Intervention, development, and refinement, and MOST begins with this preparation phase. And this phase is really critical because it lays your foundation for your intervention's conceptual model and defines the optimization objective. So the way in which one is going to define that balance between effectiveness, affordability, scalability, and efficiency. The preparation phase is really the phase that the majority of the projects in the center are in. We've also adopted the DDBT framework as a way to organize and integrate input from the co-design process. And there are several asynchronous seminars to help you get oriented to that framework as well. And so we will, you can see here the DDBT is around discover, design, build, and test. So once preparation phase goals have been accomplished in MOST, your intervention will be optimized. So you have this process where you're going to have a set of candidate intervention components and try to understand which components are best expected to demonstrate intervention ease in a subsequent confirmatory study. Okay. I think that we are going to, that's all I'm going to really say about the 2 frameworks here. So you can definitely dig into the frameworks more in the asynchronous center, but wanted to briefly orient people to that so they knew what we were talking about when we were saying things like MOST and DDBT throughout the presentation here.
And I'll just jump in to say we'll touch on those seminars a little bit later, as well as some resource library pages that you can review to familiarize yourself with those frameworks.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. So as I mentioned earlier, the Methods Core, in addition to supporting projects through their own research journey, we have our own aims, and we think it's helpful to orient team members to these aims so they can understand the broader context of why we're asking for certain things in a specific way. So across center projects, we really have 2 core aims, all focused on the suicide care pathway. So the first aim is to really develop service products. So we want to understand through center activities how these projects really inform healthcare, what healthcare systems offer, and how they can implement the interventions that we develop and find to be promising. So the aim 1A is to have multi-component interventions that can be optimized to improve care across the suicide care pathway. So we're really interested in what interventions are exceeding our benchmark, which is 70 or above on the SUS for usability. We're also interested in what optimization objectives were developed to evaluate suicide care interventions. and which intervention components demonstrated acceptability and feasibility. So that is sort of our first part of aim one, is to have these interventions that meet our standards with respect to acceptability, usability, and feasibility. And then 1B is to have point of care decision support tools that integrate the highly valid methods for understanding assessment and treatment progress. So wanting to really have tools that are embedded in the EHR and have those tools that are rated as acceptable and highly usable. Our second aim is to advance the measurement, implementation, and methods to support suicide care for AYA. So aim 2A is to identify and evaluate the moderators and mechanisms of suicide care interventions. The aim 2B is to understand the usability issues, the user needs and context, and the design requirements. And aim 2C is to have a harmonized data repository that integrates both the self-report from each study and the electronic health record data when we have permission. And that not only will we have all the studies that during the time periods in which they collect data, which is typically baseline 1 month and 2 month, but Methods Core will also in year 4 and 5 do a longer term data collection for those who are willing to participate and can be reached. Finally, for aim 2B, we have a focus on really developing new methods to measure suicide outcomes and suicide care processes that can be accurate and be appropriate for surveillance, for pragmatic trials, and for quality improvement initiatives. So we've got 7 different questions that we're hoping to answer with respect to how to improve the way in which we're measuring suicide risk and suicide care processes. Okay, I think with that, like really high level overview of what we're doing in the Methods Core, I'm gonna, Lucas, turn it to you to talk about the project journey.
Absolutely. And I will steal the screen sharing from you if possible, so I can jump over to Figma.
Oh, that's smart. You definitely don't want me doing that.
So I'm going to jump us over to Figma. Figma is one of the tools that all folks at SCRC have access to. It's a digital whiteboarding tool, and I will just pilot us around to look at the SCRC Project Journey. As you can probably anticipate, this is a continual work in progress, ever updating. So I will start here with our key. So coordinating core items will be in yellow, policy core items will be orange, team science core is this teal color, and then methods core is purple with some subgroups here for most DDBT and quantitative specific callouts. So I'll start us from the very beginning. This is the R03 application process. So the goals of this process are to solicit applicants for R03 funding, emphasizing research investigators traditionally underrepresented in research. We want to receive the applications to be reviewed and then review those applications scientifically and from the advisory board perspective. So this, probably unsurprisingly, is a fairly straightforward process. We put out a call for applications. There is a letter of intent that gets submitted to SCRC. We then review those LOIs and then send determination letters to invite folks to submit a full application. Those applications are submitted. Reviewers then generate critiques and initial scores for those applications. And I'm actually going to go back here a little bit. There is a consultation that is offered between LOIs and full applications submitted. So some of our Methods Core faculty were available to provide consultation if interested to applicants. Anyways, jumping back, so applications submitted, reviewers generated critiques. There was a faculty review committee to rate and rank the applications, and then select applications from that review were then sent to the advisory council to review, ultimately ending with 2 funded applications. So our outcomes of this process are that there are 2 R03 applications selected for funding and provided with the following: reviewer critiques, a summary of the review committee's discussion of strengths and weaknesses, as well as feedback from SCRC's advisory boards. Those funded R03 grantees then receive a welcome letter to onboard them to the center, which includes access to some of our digital tools like Basecamp and SharePoint, as well as both to Methods Core and center leadership for additional onboarding. So lots of connections and exciting things coming right as projects get funded. And then we go into the intake process with SCRC's Methods Core. So the goal here is to contextualize research projects within the center goals, specifically within those research aims that Molly went through, and align our projects with the methodological framework. Further align, really, because folks were already aligned given their applications. And then we will update project plans in response to reviewer and advisory board critiques. So this process, there's a pre-intake meeting to introduce grantees to the intake process. You'll be provided with some Methods Core seminar recordings. In fact, you'll get all of the Methods Core seminar recordings, but we want to direct your attention to these 4. So the measurement of the suicide care pathway that Molly recorded, the analytics methods, considerations in suicide care research with Andrew and Kevin, introduction to the MOST framework from Kelly, and then a DDBT overview, which I recorded. Grantees, after getting these seminars and the reviewer critique, will optionally be able to update their grant document based on feedback from the application review process. And we ask that grantees submit an intake survey. This intake survey looks very similar to the letter of intent survey that was completed during the application process. Methods Core faculty, the intake subcommittee, will then review the grant document and the intake survey, and there will be a 1-hour discussion with Methods Core intake subcommittee to review the methodological feedback and suggest changes to the project. At this time, grantees are given access to Figma and Atlas TI post that discussion. Atlas TI is our qualitative analysis software. I'll touch more on that later. And then grantees edit their grant document intake survey with asynchronous support from Methods Core as needed until a finalized grant document and intake survey is achieved. They submit those 3, so the grant document, a response letter to any reviewer critique, and the intake survey, and then they submit their IRB. So the outcomes are this finalized project plan, initial DDBT red caps will start to be built based on your intake process, and any support that the team may need has been identified. If you want a more detailed walkthrough of this intake process, you can find that in this linked document here, which will be shared with all research teams. Then we get into the meat of doing the research. So I'm going to start here at the top. We have a number of regularly scheduled meetings. The goals of these regularly scheduled meetings are to track research team progress, support the execution of project-specific and center-level aims, and then to just foster and deepen relationships. We are a growing community each year, and so these meetings are a chance to come together, spend time with each other, and discuss our work. Monthly, we have the external talk series. This is the first Wednesday of the month from 9 to 10 a.m. We also have an internal talk series, which is the 4th Wednesday of the month, 9 to 10 a.m. The external talks are more for external audiences presenting our work and accomplishments. Internal talks are just going to be folks internal to SCRC, so funded studies, some of our advisory board folks, potentially folks who are members of our various cores. Once per quarter, the internal talk will be an all hands with PI and research staff meeting. The rest of these will be works in progress, updating from a research team or one of SCRC's cores. There's also the Collaborating Scholars Seminar from Team Science on the 4th Friday of every month, and then research staff meetings, which are occurring every 2nd Tuesday of every other month. These will get canceled if there's any overlap with internal talks. we have a practice and working theory of we want to reduce meetings where possible. So if there's overlap, consider that we will cancel. I think everybody's in favor of less meetings when not necessary. And then I'll just call out that there's regular center level reporting as needed. Several times per year, we have the advisory board and steering committee meetings. These are biannually in winter and late spring. Our 2025 dates are February 28th and June 16th. And research teams may be required to provide updates. Attendance invitations will vary for these. And then 3 times per year, we have contextualizing meetings with a panel of policy, lived experience, and other non-academic roles. These occur in January, May, and September. January is our non-academic mentor panel to present on selected topics to all of our research teams with a discussion. PIs were required to attend, and this has already occurred. In May, our research teams are presenting to the non-academic mentor panel for feedback and discussion. Again, PIs are required to attend, and this is scheduled for May 21st from that 9 to 10:30 a.m. So put that hold on your calendar. You will get an invite for this, I should say. And then in September, invited RO3 applicants and current collaborating scholars will present to the non-academic mentor panel for feedback and discussion. Attendees scheduled in time slots for privacy. And that is September 17th, already scheduled on folks' calendar. We also have a data safety monitoring board, DSMB meeting that meets approximately annually in the fall. This is only required for projects entering the test phase and where determined appropriate for DSMB monitoring. And then once per funding, there's a grant writers boot camp for RO3 attendees. This is co-hosted with the University of Washington Alacrity Center. So keep an eye out for details on that. Once per funding, we also had a center-wide retreat. We had one in January of 2024. Our next one is probably going to occur in the summer of 2026. Again, a chance for all of our center, various cores, research teams, and projects to come together. And at the end of the P50 center level funding, we have a tentative 2027 policy conference in Washington, D.C. More details to come. And then this is just a good to know for research projects. We don't have to attend these meetings, but our GIST team, which is our coordinating core, meets on Monday mornings. Methods Core faculty meet Tuesdays on the first, third, and fifth weeks of the month, and Wednesdays on the second and fourth weeks of the month. And then Team Science Core meets on Fridays. Just want folks to be aware of some of the places where decisions are being made. So if you want to put something on the agenda for discussion with these cores, you can kind of get an idea of when that might be happening and when decisions might be shared out with folks. So our outcomes of these meetings are shared understanding of center progress, a submission of study deliverables to NIMH, and a community of researchers who teach, support, and utilize our novel methodologies. Yay to us continuing to build community. In addition to these regular meetings, you also have these DDBT phase transitions. So these are to document learnings at the outcome of each of the phases, and also to support project infrastructure and help teams prepare for the next phase. So you'll see this looks very familiar to the methodological framework slide that Molly presented. When you wrap up your discover phase work, you'll have a DDBT phase transition into design build. When you wrap up design build, you'll have a phase transition into test. And that phase transition process will include a pre-meeting survey. I will likely meet with your team to complete that survey, then a phase transition meeting to discuss those survey items. We'll go over the outcomes and usability issues that you're reporting. And then much later, after all of our teams have completed these phase transition meetings, Methods Core will be analyzing these outcomes and usability issues to answer all of the research questions that Molly walked through. We'll also note here, we have some REDCap templates for collecting common data elements. You'll get the REDCap template for Discover and Design Build. And then when you are transitioning from Design Build into Test, if that is relevant for your project, you'll meet with SCRC's data manager to initiate the pilot REDCap consultation for your projects in the test phase. That is a more complicated build given some of the clinical outcomes that are relevant in the test phase. And then again, we have optimization phase and most evaluation phase. This is likely not relevant for most RO3 studies. And just a note here that while SCRC funded studies in the test phase do meet NIH's criteria for phase 1 clinical trial, for internal SCRC practice, we're only going to call studies clinical trials if they meet the criteria for phase 2 through 4. Typically, studies will only meet this criteria for phase 2 through 4 if you're in the most optimization or evaluation phases. Our DSMB will review a summary and the IRB protocol of all test phase trials to determine if they need DSMB level oversight or are exempt. So lots of things happen when projects start to transition into the test phase. It gets a little bit more complicated. And our outcomes for this phase transition process are that data has been collected in service of these methods core specific aims, and that your team has been supported with the proper REDCap infrastructure and center level support. And then a little note here, this is fairly straightforward, ad hoc consultation. Of course, if you need help, assistance, or want to talk through anything at any point, you can schedule that. And this is, you're not going to review SCRC's type of support spreadsheet. This doesn't exist anymore. You're going to review SCRC's resource library. And email UW SCRC to request consultation, and we'll get you connected with the appropriate methods core folks. And then lastly, we'll note there's a project wrap-up process. The goals of this are to track on the generation of scientific products that are competitive for renewal of the P50 grant, and then also complete center-wide analysis of cross-project data that advances suicide care. We've got some guidelines for academic publication. We want to ensure that all of the data is stored in our SCRC repository. We want to inform all of the users that you engage throughout your project of the outcomes, and then reflect on our methodological framework, identify some pipelines to additional funding, and identify appropriate pathways for policy core shareouts, any policy outcomes related to your project. And our outcomes here are high impact dissemination across disciplinary venues and suicide care community and policy arenas, and then renewal of the P50 grant and projects moving into the next stage of funding, as well as finally identifying novel strategies and future opportunities for high impact suicide care. So that was a pretty detailed look through of the project journey that you will go through. Some parts will not be relevant for all projects, but hopefully that's helpful for just contextualizing where you are. And I'm going to jump us back into our PowerPoint slides here. Molly, are you seeing the speaker version?
Yep.
Let me swap displays then. Is
That
better?
looks good.
Great. So I will run through our Methods Core seminar series. We have wrapped this up as of January 2025, so we have a bunch of recordings to share with you all. The Methods Core seminar series is designed to equip participants with the tools and knowledge necessary to design, implement, and evaluate effective research aimed at improving suicide care. It was a combination of synchronous sessions that we did with folks, as well as some pre-recorded asynchronous videos. We might have more asynchronous videos that come out. We're always building our knowledge of our methodological framework and support that might be needed. And you see some of the learning outcomes here. So it's essentially having a deeper understanding of our methodological framework. There were 15 recorded seminars. You can see a list of those over here, and the topics focused on specific methodological topics of interest and relevant to SCRC studies. The synchronous sessions are about an hour. The asynchronous ones tend to be about 20 to 30 minutes. Primarily, the audience is SCRC research teams, although it might be relevant to other folks. Some of these are publicly available. But for everybody who's been funded by SCRC, all of the seminar slides and recordings are available in our SharePoint at this folder linked here. In year two, the seminar series and all hands spotlight series have been reworked into these internal and external monthly meetings that I talked about in that Figma board. And those topics will be more workshop format, cross-team sharing. Awesome. I'm going to wrap up here with just some what supports are available to you. So we have those meetings. Again, just reiterating those required meetings are the project intake, phase transitions, in which you'll be reporting usability issues, a required meeting around your test phase REDCap build, and then if determined appropriate for your project, potentially a required meeting with the Data Safety Monitoring Board before your clinical trial/pilot can begin. Ad hoc meetings, you can email me. I think on the Figma board, I said email UW, SCRC at UW. If you email either one, we'll get you connected with the right folks. And then we have a number of templates and resources. The SCRC resource library exists in our Basecamp. This is pages with some links to studies, helpful tips and tricks around various methods. We have a REDCap template for projects in the discover and design build phases. This is the DDB REDCap template. There's a URAP template. This is the risk and reporting. I can never remember the acronym for URAP. Molly, what's that acronym?
I don't know right now.
Yeah, it's okay. That's okay. This is the risk and reporting template. And then we have our data safety monitoring board, as well as a functionality matrix template, some participant consent language. And then for R3s only, there is a milestones tracking template for team science that they've asked you to complete. And then we've got a number of tools to support you all. So Basecamp, which I've mentioned several times, that's our project management tool. This is also where the Methods Core resource library is stored. Figma, which I just showed you, is a digital whiteboarding tool and also useful for wireframing, which is one of our human-centered design methods. You'll get a specific link to join. We have unlimited access via an educational license. And then we have access to Atlas TI, which is a qualitative data analysis software. We have unlimited seats, but it is limited to 5 concurrent users at any point, which should be totally fine for our purposes. And then we've partnered with Academy of Languages, Translation Interpretation, for a center level contract around translation and interpretation services. Let us know if you need to be utilizing that. And I'll just call out that project teams are responsible for selecting their own transcription service. And we also have SPSS that is available for quantitative analysis if you're interested in that. That's everything. We're re-recording this asynchronously, and there's no one in the room with us, so there's no time for questions. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact us via email. Molly, anything to add as we wrap up?
I don't think so. This was kind of a whirlwind tour of the Methods Core, and so you're not expected to memorize any of these things. It was just expected to be an orientation, and you should reach out if you have questions.
Great. Awesome. I'll end it there.
Thank you for watching this seminar from the University of Washington Suicide Care Research Center. Please take a moment to complete the anonymous evaluation to share your feedback. If you would like to receive a certificate of completion, be sure to also complete the attestation. Links to both surveys are available in the description of this video. Your input is much appreciated.